Picture a conversation with your younger self. What advice, experience, and lessons would you need to hear? In this episode, brought to you in partnership with our friends at Amplitude, a true product leader is going to share what she's learned and what she would tell her younger self. So get ready to get career knowledge that'll make you feel like you're one step ahead, just like your future self needs to be. Keep watching so you don't miss the chance to delve into Agata's world of product innovation and leadership. It's a true masterclass in empowering yourself to chart your career path to product career success. Coming up on this episode, advice Agata would tell her younger self, the keys to mastering product management success, how financial literacy can be a game changer for you and your teams, and the importance of empathy and user centricity. And joining us today is Agata, a remarkable product leader. Now, Agata, your career started in engineering and later moved to management consulting and into product, becoming the SVP of Product at FullStory. I'm interested to know, with your career path being what it is so far, and knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given yourself 10 years ago?
So a couple of things. I think first, the importance of, having a plan, but being very flexible in that plan. I think I've always been someone, even growing up, who had a plan A and then a B and then a C, because inevitably A and B are going to fall through. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But the reality is that when you go through life, there are certain opportunities that are going to show up. And you cannot be dogmatic about I said I was going to do this thing over there, so I'm just going to close off my, I'm not going to listen to this thing over here, because this thing over here might actually be the better thing for you to do. And so you have to be flexible and open-minded. And when things come up, really, have an open mind and seek to understand and learn more, and be curious and take some risks. And, it's funny I mentioned I was risk averse. I am. But I think one of the things that's really helped me, and the advice that I would have given myself, 10 years ago, is, when you're faced with an opportunity that kind of scares you, think through, what's the worst that will happen? Let's assume this is the wrong thing to do. Cool. Work through that in your head and say, okay, what's the worst thing that'll happen? And then figure out, okay, and so then if that does happen, what am I going to do about it? And when you walk through that, you realize that, the worst case scenario actually isn't that bad anyway. There are ways that you can still, resolve whatever ends up happening. And that's really helped me feel more comfortable taking risks. Additionally, a couple other things that I would add, in terms of feedback that I would give myself a couple of years ago, get to know people. I am naturally an introvert. And so what that means is it doesn't always give me energy to reach out to people. In fact, it's hard for me to reach out to people. I don't like the term networking. I think it feels very, I just don't like it. And so for me, it can be really hard to take that step and reach out to somebody. But the reality of it is, every time I have a conversation, it's incredibly valuable, right? I learn about what someone else is doing. I learn about what's top of mind for them. I learn about how they've solved similar challenges to me. I always get something from it, and it's always a good conversation. It rarely has it ever not been valuable. And so that's another piece of feedback I would give myself 10 years ago, which is, don't be afraid to reach out to people. Just do it. You're going to enjoy it after the fact. Just get through that initial hurdle of reaching out to somebody. I think the last thing that I would say for this question is that there's no substitute for experience. And I think the reason that this is really important is, I think for me, and I think a lot of your listeners, I'm guessing, we are people who, I'm going to make some assumptions, who are hard workers, who want to do new, better things, continue to learn, continue to grow, and we're willing to put in the work, right? We're smart, we're competent. And so there can be this feeling that as long as I work really hard, I'm going to figure out all the things. And the reality of it is that will get you very far, and you need grit and you need to work hard, but also you need to gain experience, and you just need to get your hands dirty. You need to make mistakes, and that is how you're going to learn. I think one of the things that I'm so excited about in terms of product and product management these days is how hot it is. We now have classes, we have courses, you can get degrees. There's so much great content that did not exist, 15, 20 years ago. And that's a good thing. I'm excited about this. But I think a risk with all of this is that it can be easy to think that, well, as long as I read the article, I'm going to know all the things. As long as I take a class, I'm going to get the frameworks, and the frameworks will help me define and determine what I need to do. And to be clear, I think all of this content and these classes, they're good, and they give you a tool in your toolkit. And at the end of the day, you need to go in and get your hands dirty and do the work. And I think that's actually where most of the learning is going to come from. And I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that 10, 20 years ago. But I do today. I've seen it. I've seen it for myself. I've seen it for others. I think it's really important to keep that in the back of your head. There is no substitute for experience.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. Is there anything else you'd like to share with your younger self or the listeners' younger selves out there today?
I think there are a couple of things. I think going back to what I said earlier about the great thing about consulting, right, and some of the skills I learned there, the importance of, again, communication and collaboration, right? In product especially, we are successful by, one of the ways is by influencing without authority, right? And one of the ways that you do that is to effectively communicate and collaborate with other people. And so, for instance, when you're speaking with someone, whether it's an individual or a group, whether it's verbal or it's written, you truly have to understand who you're talking to, what matters to them, what motivates them, what's top of mind for them. Ironically, it's no different than what we should be doing as product managers or folks in product. But you can forget that, right? Because sometimes it's easy to think, well, objectively, what I'm saying is right. I have data, and my data is accurate, and so therefore my data says we should do what we need to do. But at the other end of your data and your analysis is a human, right? A human or group of people who need to be brought along. They have to understand what it is that you're proposing and why. And so just the importance, again, of understanding the person on the other end, and then aligning on sort of and acknowledging where are our goals the same and where do they start to sort of break apart. And what I mean by that, as an example, right? Within an organization, right, objectively speaking, you all have the same goal, right? Which is, let's make a lot of money. Let's make this company successful. But how different teams do that, how that ladders up can differ, right? So for instance, at the risk of oversimplifying, sales, right? So first of all, we have the most phenomenal sales team here at FullStory and a great working relationship. Sales has quota, right? And every quarter they have to deliver a certain amount of revenue and deals closed. In product, right, you've got teams delivering products and they want to make sure that they're building the best product, the best experience that will drive adoption, engagement, and so on. And there could be situations where something that we're building is important to a sales cycle, but guess what? The timelines don't align, right? We're trying to close a deal in a quarter, and this thing's going to take us a few more months. And so acknowledging that tension and that difference is the first step to saying, okay, well, ultimately, we both want to close a deal. How do we do that? And, do the right thing for the customer. How do we do that given that we have different ways of measuring success within our own teams? And so then you can start to get creative, right? And say things like, okay, well, let's get on the phone with this customer. Let's show them what we're doing. We're already in development. Maybe we can show them screenshots. Maybe we can demo to them. Maybe we can include this in their deal, but it'll be a beta, and we set those expectations up front. There are ways that you can solve for those tensions, but you have to, again, understand the person that you're collaborating with and what matters to them. And ultimately, again, where your goals are the same and where they potentially start to differ a little bit in terms of how you're, the things that you're marching towards. So I think that was really important learning. Again, just the importance of soft skills in product, I think is absolutely critical. The other thing I'll say is, it's so important for us in product to make sure that we're doing right by the user and their customer, and that we understand that. I think it can be very easy, especially in larger organizations, to kind of just be heads down and do the work, and you're spread so thin, and you kind of forget about the customer, and that's absolutely terrible. And I think when I was much earlier in my career, I definitely did not do as much there as I should have. And I quickly learned, because once you make a couple of mistakes where you've actually made the experience worse for the user, you're like, hold on a second, what am I doing here? This is the opposite of what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I very, very quickly learned the importance of making space for understanding user behavior. I mean, it's even silly to say this out loud now. But when I first got into product, it was hard to prioritize some of that. And that was definitely a shame. And so so a couple of things. I think the importance of using your own products, right? That is critical. I cannot stress that enough. Now, you have to be aware of the potential biases there. Like, you are ultimately not your end user in many cases, and you can't just assume that what you're experiencing is what they're experiencing. But you have to use the product. You have to know your product inside and out. and you have to understand where some of the opportunities are. It's an incredible way to drive empathy for your users.
I remember being a director of product of one of Europe's largest unicorns. One of the things that struck me was the lack of financial literacy at the specific organization and within the product team. Is this something, Agata, that you've noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that, the product management has evolved so much over the years. And again, it means different things, or it can mean different things in different organizations. But ultimately, product management is the discipline that is making sure that we're developing the product in a way that delivers value to customers and is right for the business. And so, yes, you have to be business savvy. You have to understand the business metrics. You have to understand sales cycles. I'm speaking to B2B, but in B2C, you have to understand how the company makes money. You have to understand those things to make sure that you are doing the right thing from a prioritization standpoint, and you're working with the engineering teams on delivering the most value for the company and for your customers, for sure. And I think that the more that the entire team, right, product team, so UX and engineering, understands that as well, the easier it will be for the team to be mind melded on here are the things that we'll need to be doing, right? And so that's earlier just riffing a little bit about trust within the team, right? This is if a product manager is bringing that kind of knowledge and expertise to the team, that will absolutely build trust. Again, teams want to make sure they're working on the most valuable things, and so one, let's make sure that we understand how that's actually how value is created for the company, and then it's a lot easier to make sure that you're actually working on the right things, for sure.
Now, as we wrap up today, is there any one last piece of advice that you can share with the audience on professional growth into product leadership?
I think, when I think about the words that I wish someone had said earlier in my career that eventually people told me, and then now I share with others who are looking to be leaders, there are two pieces of feedback that really stick in my head. The first one is, don't be afraid of getting your hand slapped. Earlier in my career, I really over-indexed on making sure I was doing the right thing, that I had approval, that I had the permission, and I was really, looking back at it, working within a box, essentially. And that's not the real word, y'all. It's just not. And so I remember there was one point earlier in my career where I was in a situation that was very in a very matrixed, I would say, situation. It was very difficult to get work done. And I felt like all the weight was on my shoulders, and I felt like there was no way for me to do the right thing because the definition of right there was no one definition. Different teams cared about different things. And I just didn't see a path forward. And so, this boss of mine sat me down and he's like, why are you so afraid of just getting your hand slapped? Why are you afraid of doing something that's going to potentially ruffle some feathers? And it was such an eye-opening piece of feedback because he was right. I was afraid of doing something that wasn't, by somebody sort of determined to be right. And after that, it gave me the confidence and the conviction to say, actually, you know what? I believe I know what we need to be doing, and I can defend it, and I have proof of it. And so I'm going to do my best to do that thing. And if I ruffle some feathers, I'll ruffle some feathers, and then I'll work through that. And in some cases, I might need support from my management, my leadership. But ultimately, I'm here to do a job, and I have to get over that fear of potentially, again, doing something that somebody might consider to be wrong. So that was very helpful feedback, just to give me that confidence that, like, no, I'm here for a reason, and I might ruffle some feathers, but I have conviction in what I believe we need to be doing. The other piece of feedback that I got is actually related to that somehow, and it really gets to, again, just having more confidence, which is I once had a manager tell me, he goes, Agata, if you're doing exactly what I'm telling you to do, then I'm paying you way too much money. And I was like, what? Because you're my manager. Like, you should, of course, you're going to tell me what I need to be doing. And what he meant was that, every one of us has a role to do, right? We're hired for a reason. And we, for our area of responsibility, our scope, we need to be the subject matter expert. We need to know everything about the stuff that's in our scope. And our management layers, right? they will know some of that. But their job is to sort of connect dots between different areas of scope and, remove roadblocks, etc. And so there is no way in hell, that my manager can know all the things that I know, right? And so if he's telling me, he's giving me some kind of direction, and it doesn't sound right to me, again, because I have 95% more information than he does, I need to say something. He doesn't always know. And he shouldn't. That's my job to know. And that was such an eye-opening piece of feedback to me as well, which is like, again, your managers are doing their best to give you direction and guidance. And at the same time, you need to push back. You need to question. You need to help shape it if you have information that you believe directionally changes what you should be doing. And that's that type of feedback was absolutely altering for me.
With advice from the future, you're now equipped to make career decisions with more and more confidence. You can connect with Agata on LinkedIn to stay updated on her insights, which I've always really, really enjoyed. And if you've enjoyed this video, please join us in our episode on building effective teams with Tiago Faria and his experience of leading a product team at a company that grew from 20 to 8,000 employees in less than 3 years while he headed up the product team. So from me, Ross Webb, until next time, bye for now.